Okay, so welcome everyone and welcome Ömer. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we will be hosting Ömer Karaduman, who is a 2014 Bilkent economics graduate. And he had his PhD degree from MIT and now pursuing a postdoc at Stanford. That I would like to leave this stage to you, Ömer, to just introduce yourself and explain introduce yourself and just tell us about who you are. Then we will proceed with the questions. Welcome again.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here as a Bilkent graduate. Uh, so as you said, as Doa said, I graduated from Bilkent Economics in 2014. Uh, Before that, I'm from Istanbul, and I was in Istanbul. It's kind of actually odd, and I think it's not that common that people from Istanbul to go to Bilkent, but I'm glad that I did, and I enjoyed every second of it. So I uh, recommend everyone from Istanbul to consider Bilkent as an option. It's definitely Ankara is a nice city. So just to add that, and after that I went to, as you said, MIT to get my PhD. I worked on several different topics. I worked on market design, kidney exchange, uh, matching platform competition, and recently I'm working more on energy markets, renewables, and decarbonization agendas of different countries. So in my PhD thesis, I worked on energy storage's impact and renewable energy's impact on wholesale electricity market.
Mm.
And now I'm at Stanford Bits and Watts Institute, which is an institute that's mostly interested in grid stability and electricity markets and overall the agenda of decarbonization and how we're going to reach to zero carbon emission generation mix and what's the pathway to that.
Great, nice meeting you again. But if we take a step back, can you tell us a bit more about how did all this started? How did you decide to go for a PhD when you were in undergrad?
Sure. I think it all started when I was in high school. I like in Turkey, we all started as a general students, and then we go to Turkish and math, or math and science, or social sciences. Uh, I decided that I don't want to be an engineer. Not that I don't like engineers. It's just that I thought, for me, the social science aspect is more interesting. Also, I liked mathematics. I worked on math Olympics when I was in high school. So that was sort of a that created for me to seek different career paths also after the university. So I decided that I can do economics, and after that I can do academics. So when I look for, so I after the university entrance exam, I was one of the lucky ones that I got nice results. So I was able to go to anywhere I like. So I tried to focus on, when I was visiting different universities, I tried to focus on more on the, the parts that is related with academics. So in Bilkent, I talked to Tarık Kara, and he kind of convinced me that the Bilkent can give me the overall general background that is needed for a PhD in economics. And when I started Bilkent economics, actually, all the things that Tarık Hoca told me turned out to be true. I got a lot of support from different faculty members when I told them that I'm interested in academics and I want to go and do PhD. We can talk about different, details about what might be needed and what is good for people who want to be PhD. But overall, I think having a state of mind to do a PhD while you're second year or maybe at the beginning of third year is kind of needed.
Yeah, So you decided that you want to go for PhD even before you started undergrad. So you started with a dedicated goal. Gotcha. Okay. So I would like to structure this conversation like in three phases. One is what should an ideal candidate do to, prepare for a PhD and for the application, and then how do you spend your time in a PhD during those 6 years, and then what is the career path ahead afterwards. So as you just briefly mentioned, that maybe we can deep dive on the application process, and even before that, the preparation process. What do you think the key skills expected from a PhD candidate are?
I think key skill is motivation and determination in general. So I think going for a PhD is a very complicated decision. It involves a lot of things. Like you kind of pause your adulthood life for at least 6 years. In some cases, more than 6 years if you go for a master's degree first. It's like 8 years of pause while your classmates are working on in their fields and their private sector jobs. Like they, not that PhD is kind of not allowing for having a family of your own, but it's kind of putting a couple of struggles on top of that. But it's a huge sacrifice for sure. So being assured that you want to do this, I think is the first step and most important step. Anything else that comes after that, like there are of course important details, but all of things are tied in motivation and determination. So you need to be sure that you want to do a PhD in economics.
Right.
But some of the skills that I think is overly mentioned in general, especially for economic PhD in economics, you need to have a kind of a mathematics background. This is not to say that you need to get every math class that you can ever get. I did the minor in mathematics. I'm not sure that it was. I don't know whether that was the reason why I got into MIT, but it kind of helped me to think more about the sort of the reasoning underlying the models. It's kind of like at the PhD, at the graduate level, economics is closer to. There are lots of models and there are lots of proofs that is involved in the sort of backbones of many models in economics. So having a nice grasp on in general principle of mathematics definitely helps, and this is definitely one of the things that graduate student acceptance committees across the world is looking for. So they're like, I mean, I think thinking about their perspective is definitely helpful. So think for a second, you think that let's imagine that you are a committee member in Northwestern, and there are different applications that comes before you, and then you need to evaluate them one way or another. One candidate is from, let's say, Germany, from some university, and there's another one from Bilkent. So one of the things that people look for is these signals that might give them information about the capacity of this particular applicant. So math, having a math classes and doing well in those math classes, even though it's not perfectly correlated with your potential in economics, it's a good signal. It was a good signal for a long time. Maybe it's changed now, but people are still paying attention to that. I mean, we can talk about recommendation letters. If you don't have any specific questions, I can go on about like recommendation letters and other things.
So as we mentioned on the classes, I would like to deep dive on that one first. So what are are there any specific courses that you would recommend to take for an undergrad student to become both to learn and then become let's say a good candidate for the applications?
Real analysis is I think it's definitely helpful. So the reason why the real analysis is helpful is because in many programs, the first class you take in microeconomics involves a lot of proofs and a lot of concept that is in real analysis. And and in many undergrad economics curriculum, you don't really see those concepts much. So having a real analysis class is probably going to help. Also, having an understanding in differential equations and linear algebra, definitely helpful. But overall, I think I don't know what is analytical thinking, but people told me that taking different math classes in general helps to develop your own analytical thinking. Regarding to that, maybe like if you have so on top of real analysis, differential algebra and like linear algebra, etc. Maybe you can take a couple of other fun courses on your own. Like I took, for instance, complex analysis because it was a must in math minor. I hated it. I never used it, but it kind of gave me a couple of give me a different perspective. Definitely. But I think on top of math classes, there are some classes in economics that people who so like there are some classes in economics, especially in master's programs, that I think anyone who's remotely interested in going into a PhD program should at least take a look at. So the first micro theory course, also a micro theory course in Bilkent's master's program, is it's very similar to what I had at MIT first year. So going into that classes and imagine yourself taking that class for a grade, I think can help you to sort of see what your capabilities at this point or what your capacity at this point to go into these PhD programs. So I definitely recommend to at least sitting down in those classes for a while.
Right.
And if you can, taking those classes for a grade would be really powerful in your application for sure.
Right. And do you think taking all those classes in a couple of years before you graduate is feasible, or should a student, like, let's say, prioritize one over another?
So personally, since I decided to go into the PhD before I got into Bilkent economics, I tried to sort of manipulate my schedule in a way that can allow for taking those courses. So I took almost all the courses in first year master's program in Bilkent. I also did minor in math, but I was unable to do that because I kind of managed my my schedule in the sense that I took a lot of classes. In my first year and second year, I took classes during the summer. I do not recommend that to everyone. I recommend that only if you are certain that you want to do a PhD in economics. I think from the prioritization perspective, so many people, I definitely recommend to first go for a master's degree in Turkey or in Europe. So you're probably going to take those master's classes that Bilkent offers in somewhere, like in Bilkent or different places. So maybe you don't really have to take those classes for a grade. And in that sense, I think taking a couple of math classes can be prioritized. Also, those classes are undergrad classes, so you would have in your class you will have your peers with you that can help you with some of the homeworks. And but yeah. I'm thinking maybe I mean this is also like I know that being sure about going to PhD or like having that decision is really tough. So on top of taking these like math classes, I also recommend to take different classes from different departments to kind of discover yourself even more. I mean, the Bilkent's economics program actually allows for that too. So I took, I think, at least 5 courses from communication and design department. I almost did a minor in like cinema or something like that, and I really liked it. But I thought that it probably not, it won't be a good idea to do that professionally. Maybe I can do that eventually. But
Right.
discovering that is definitely really valuable, not just for your overall life, but also deciding in PhD career, because you really want to be sure to spend your next 8 years uh, in an office working on things that's probably 99% of your friends, families are not going to really read or not going to care about.
Got it. Got it. And so, what about the extracurricular activities in terms of their importance, not only to serve stretching your application, but also help you to, decide what you want to do? Is there any specific extracurricular activities that you can recommend or you find useful?
I mean, personally, I feel like so my job is so the job that I'm doing trying to do that professionally and earn money from that. But personally, the things that give me joy is more my hobbies. I enjoy doing my hobbies, and I think many people is similar to me. So extracurricular activities definitely you should couple that with your academic ambitions, because otherwise if you just focus on academia and all of a sudden in your first year in PhD or second year in PhD you decided to let it go, then you will end up with a really bad college experience, which is like once in a lifetime. I think if you like, playing an instrument is definitely one of the boring recommendations that everyone gives, but it's definitely it's a fun activity. I did a couple of kind of academic related extracurricular activities while I was in at Bilkent. We had a student club. It was called Biat. It was for like we tried to design a club that can help people who want to do academics in economics. But as you can guess, there weren't many people who were interested in academics. And like now I'm thinking about me in that period of time, I kind of think that experience helped me to improve my organizational skills for sure. But other than that, I could have done other things. I don't know, like going for a different student club could have been more fun. Uh, but it definitely helped me to kind of improve
Hmm.
my organizational skills, which actually helped me at MIT too. So at MIT, I was working with the Turkish Student Association. Uh, that also like it's so that is also something I think I'm going ahead of this questions, but like while you are doing
Uh,
PhD, you need to also couple that with the extracurricular activities, because like when you're going for a PhD, especially in abroad, you if you just focus on your own PhD and do nothing else, and if you don't integrate with the society around you, that is also going to create a very unsustainable and boring
yeah.
environment for you. And like as I said, if you kind of decided not to do it after your second year or third year, everything will become a torture if you want to continue to do it just for the sake of the title.
Hmm.
But if you also go back to Turkey, then those last 3 years is going to be kind of a waste of time.
Right. So, given that you're gonna spend 6 more years after graduation, it's nice to adopt a lifestyle in which you can combine the professional work, the academic work with the extracurricular. Got it. Makes sense. Totally agree. So what about like I'm thinking of two other things that can help you in your application and your, let's say, preparation. One of them is conducting a research or a study while you are in undergrad, and the other one is the internships. How do you think those two aspects, how important those are?
For the research part, conducting a research project, I think, I mean, I did a couple of like very kind of simple stuff. I don't, I won't call it research, but realistically, no one is expecting an undergrad to do a decent research. If you do it, that's great. That's like really nice. But I didn't do it, and I got into MIT. So I think that sort of says that you don't really have to do it. Also, like being an expert on something to conduct not a groundbreaking, but like frontier research is really tough. I don't think undergrad students will have enough, at least, I don't know, like the research itself, it's totally different than, like we can talk about that as well, totally different than taking classes and like doing well in classes. But maybe not conducting research, but assisting a research could be a great experience. So it could be a data cleaning job, or it could be even proofreading or something like that. Definitely having an experience in doing research one way or another is going to give you a great experience. It doesn't necessarily look great in your application. It doesn't necessarily would help you a lot, but it definitely for the application, but it will definitely help you a lot when once you decided to conduct your own research. And for the internship, I didn't do any internship in my like I never went to, for in our year the internship wasn't mandatory, so I didn't do it. Uh, if you're going for academia, I think it's not really necessary. But like uh, if your internship involves some rigorous research assistantship, that could be helpful. But other than that, I think internships are helpful in deciding to go for a PhD. So that, like doing an internship will give you a little sense of what is out there and what else you can do.
Right.
And I think in general, PhD is I mean, this is it's maybe personal, but I feel like PhD is something that uh, that should be rarely done, in the sense that you are foregoing many things. Like you are, as I said at the beginning, pausing your life for 8 years. You are, so your peers who are as capable as you, if they do something else other than PhD, they definitely will make more money for sure. And in general ground, they will have more respect from general society. You definitely will be respectful in your own community, but in many sense, not doing PhD is better option for pretty much the bulk of the population. So I just want to remind that, so PhD is something that is like you need to be sure, and doing internship can definitely help you to decide whether you want to do it or not.
I see. So it's a good thing to test your hypothesis about.
Yeah, personally, I like before I began, I thought that I was the person who's for this job. I was the person who needs to do a PhD. And after getting the PhD, I realized that I was barely over the line. So I'm glad that I did PhD, but I feel like at this moment I was barely over the line. I met with people who were just devoted to do the PhD. And then I realized that maybe I kind of overestimated my ambition for a PhD. But like right now, I'm glad that I did. But I'm just trying to give you a little bit perspective about what your expectation compared to the reality. That there could be some
I see.
differences.
Good that you're over the line at least. Okay, so let's say that we did the internships and then all the preparations, we are committed, and then we really want to go for the application. And two important things that I'm thinking that I would like to hear your opinion on their importance. One of them is the recommendation letters, like how important are they in the application and how should they be like, got from the professors. And the second is the motivation letter, which is similar purpose on that. So, and what is important compared to the recommendation letters, and what is the best way to prepare it.
So recommendation letters are immensely important. I think they are the things that will get your application recognized. So many programs, they get tons of applications. Like I think at MIT, they're getting like close to 4,000 applications every year, and they don't really look at least like 3,000 of them. The way that they kind of filter those is kind of looking at the recommendations that like skipping recommendations that I might be over exaggerating the 4,000 thing. Maybe it's 400, but definitely they overlook at least 70% of it. They don't really pay too much attention. So recommendation letters are really important. And to get a good recommendation letter, the name of your recommender is definitely important. But the more important thing is your kind of a relationship and your connection with your recommender. So if you get a good grade from a top professor in your department, getting a recommendation letter from that professor is good thing. It's not a bad thing, but like maybe like I don't know how to sort of order professors, but let's say there's a mid-level professor that you did a research together, and that professor will have uh, details about your like working philosophy or like your hardship, etc. Like the number of different details that can help kind of a application committee to go over to know you better. So getting that mid-level professor's letter with all the details about you and your work ethics, that will be much more important than getting a letter from the top professor. I mean, like on top of that, if you can get that very specific letter from the top tier professor, that would be much better. But I'm just trying to say that the name is not everything, but your connection with your professor is it's not everything, but it's really important.
But you can also balance, right? So you don't have to go for just one letter. I think you have three letters to submit, so you can
Yeah,
still balance it.
it yeah, but I think having one main letter is definitely like having one very powerful letter. It's going to be very helpful. Like three mediocre letter is probably worse than having one great letter and then two normal letters. And you had another
I think
question about
the motivation letter, not
yeah,
the recommendation, but
yeah.
the
But yeah, that's the statement of purpose, statement of
same
reason,
of purpose.
something like
Yeah.
that. I mean, I don't think that is terribly important. That is just something that you write and put your sort of you kind of I mean these devices are all kind of signals. You use that statement of purpose to signal that what you have in mind while for the PhD, like while doing your PhD, what sort of questions that you have in mind, and it's kind of what verbally explains CV in some sense. That also includes your different experiences that you didn't really put on your CV. It's not terribly important, but it's something that people take a look at after they feel like you are a good candidate. So in some programs, I think pretty much in all of the programs, they kind of try to get a balance in different subfields of economics. So if you want to do econometrics, just right there, like you kind of are interested in econometrics, that kind of helps community to sort of sort you out within the people who are interested in econometrics.
Right. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's a good as a complementary in your
Yeah,
application.
it won't get you in, but it
Yeah,
can help you a little bit.
I see. I see. Okay, then we found the great letters, and then we ended up in, let's say, MIT as you did like a couple of years ago. After starting the school there, how will I expect to spend my day or my week in, let's say, in the both in the first 2 years where I take the classes, or and also in the following 4 years until I finish my PhD?
I think in general it's two person. That is really depends on what is your kind of working schedule. Like for me, I don't really uh, work on the clock. Like some people really like to work like 10 hours every day, and then like taking breaks in the weekends. Some people work in the opposite ways, like taking a whole week off, then just focusing on the next week. I mean, either way, I think works. But for the first 2 years, yeah, you take a lot of classes. I think working on those classes just like you work in undergrad, I think it's like the first 2 years basically similar, but you kind of like classes are a little bit more intense, so you need to work a little bit more, and you need to work regularly because there are homeworks, etc. But after that, it definitely depends on what your like how you can maintain your work. This is like there. I think there's like there's this boring comparison. Like PhD is a marathon. You know, you don't really need to be a sprinter to win it. You just need to sustain your interests and your motivation throughout the PhD. So because of that, some people might overburn by just working like 50 hours every week. Others can do like this bi-weekly thing, or like you can just take a huge chunk of breaks and a huge chunk of like intense work. It really depends, but the most important thing is to sort of sustain that interest and that ambition, because after 2 years of classes, you're mostly on your own. You're mostly on your own doing research, reading papers, writing your own paper, looking for different questions, which requires very different skill sets than taking classes and getting good grades. So
Yeah.
if you can sustain your ambition one way or another, just follow that schedule.
Yeah. So if you are to spend your time, most of your time on your own after the year 2, I think one important aspect here is the maybe your advisor, like who you are working with in that 4 years. And I'm also wondering what is the best way to decide which advisor is the best fit for you, and how do you pick your advisor if you have the choice, of course.
So I think after like in many programs, you don't really have to pick your advisors right away. You can after a year or two, you can pick your advisor. I mean, definitely pick an advisor in a field that you want to work on. That's like number one. Also, I mean, so some people are going for like well-known stars, Nobel laureates. It's I mean, it might work, but that definitely is not the kind of the best way to to write your thesis and going for a job market. I think having a personal connection is definitely like if you can have a good personal connection with a faculty member, going for that person is definitely better than going for a most like highly cited faculty member in your faculty. I mean that there is definitely a trade-off because those people are usually the busiest ones who are highly cited and highly regarded in the field. So there is that trade-off, but definitely they also have a better network than assistant professor or associate professors. So there's this balance, but I think especially for the main advisor, having that connection, having that relation, and understanding that your advisor can spare you a good chunk of time when you need it is definitely one of the things that I would advise everyone to look for when they're thinking about their picking their advisor.
I see. So the fit with your advisor is more important than the, let's say, reputation of the
Yeah.
advisor. I see. Um, so during this PhD time period, what are the like research opportunities that you have, and is it a big part of your PhD? How would you position it?
Research opportunity? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, like researches that you do on your, I think, to support your thesis or that you work on, basically.
That like that sort of yeah. If you want to stay in academia after the PhD, that's the
Mhm.
most important thing. Research is the
Mhm.
most your your job market paper, which is like a part of your thesis, is the most and only thing that people look for when you apply for faculty position. So that's the must. But if you want to go for a private sector, doing a research, I mean, it's also like if you get a PhD and if you go for a private firm, then there are there are not many signals that private firm can look at. So while private sector is evaluating you, they're evaluating you as a capable PhD candidate. So for that consideration, also research is important. If you do a good research, then that will be a signal for them to say that okay, this person is probably going to accomplish the task that we're gonna give him or her. Uh, so doing a research is definitely a vital part of it.
I see. But if you instead want to go for the private sector, I think internships will play a crucial role at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you decide you don't really want to stay in academia, doing an intern while you were doing a PhD is definitely helpful. I had people in my cohort that did the PhD internships and then they basically went to those companies to work. But I had also people who didn't go for an internship and got into the same firms. So it really helps, but I think the help is more on the understanding what you want part rather than your ranking from the perspective of those firms. I mean, if you do an internship in a firm that doesn't really uh, employ PhD students, then doing an internship is definitely going to open up some doors. But other than that, it's helpful, but it's definitely not a must.
Yeah, so just similarly to the internship in undergrad, then it
Yeah.
will help you to understand what you want, but not really for stretching to your application. And about what are the opportunities for internships when you're in a PhD that are provided either by the school or the environment around you?
I mean,
What are the options? Mm.
I didn't really look for internships, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that. But
I
yeah, there are like many universities they provide good information. I mean, especially asking people who are in a cohort above you might be helpful about the internship opportunities because PhD programs they usually try to keep you in academia even though they provide a little bit of information about internships, they don't really promote it. So asking for people cohort above you that did an internship is definitely will be helpful.
I see. So it depends on the career path that you would like to pursue. Having said that, what are the main career paths ahead of the PhD? How can you categorize them?
So I don't know what is the situation in Europe. but in US, people usually go for like either academia or econ consulting firms, which do an economic analysis to help litigation teams or like help law firms cases. And there is also like government entities. Also, there are like global entities like IMF, Federal Reserves that employs a lot of PhD students. Also, tech companies like Amazon. I think Amazon is the second largest firm that employ like the firm that employs second largest group of people that has PhD in economics after Federal Reserve. Also, like Uber, Lyft, they also employ a number of people from that get economic PhD in economics. So those are the like there are I think in general you can classify it in like 4 different groups like academia, tech companies, econ consulting, and like public and global firms, non-profit firms in general.
I see. How would you describe the split among those 4 in terms of proportion of the graduates?
It varies a lot in different in different programs. It varies a lot. Can you give me a second? I kind of need to fill this up.
Yeah, sure thing. Bye. Arkadaşlar sorunuz varsa istiyorsanız buradan yavaştan yazabilirsiniz. Zaten sonunda da bir 10-15 dakika Q&A yaparız.
Ben sadece sarı gömleğini çok beğendiğimi söylemek istedim zaten.
T-shirt yani.
Skirt
Gitar çalıyorsan iyisindir de Ömer. Hadi iyisin.
Okay, where were we?
Yeah, I was asking about the split among the different career paths, and then you mentioned that it varies from one school to another.
Yeah, it definitely varies a lot. For instance, at MIT, half of the people go for academia, other half is just split across these different career paths. But I think like in different schools, in terms of ranking, like if like I think in Penn State, only like 2 to 4 people going for academia. It definitely varies a lot, but it kind of changes as the sort of a pseudo ranking of the programs are changing. So as you go up on the ladder in like ranking of the programs, the percentage of people who go to academia increases, and when you go down, the percentage goes in favor of private firms.
I see. That's very interesting, and so I think there are differences among schools, not just in terms of like rankings or the fields that their graduates work in, but also in terms of culture, I assume, or the fields in economics that they're concentrated in. Like I'm pretty sure it's quite hard to draw that picture, but if you look at from a high level, how can you position different schools in terms of, let's say, culture and the focus field in US?
I mean, that is so. Departments are kind of alive creatures. They evolve. Like when I got into MIT, there were only few people who were doing theory. Now MIT is like a theory powerhouse. It happened in the last 4 years. So those things are changing rapidly. I would recommend for people to go to faculty lists and try to see which faculty members are active. Also go for last year's job market candidates and see which fields they worked in. So that will give us a nice signal about what are the fields that This is most popular in this program. But that picture is definitely changing a lot. I mean, there was a bad repetition about Chicago that kind of they accept a lot of people and then fail most of them in their first year or second. That kind of a change, for instance. So I think most of these kind of cultural things are some kind of like those are not uh, written on stone. They're changing, and I think keeping up with that while you're applying and talk to people who are in that programs and graduated in those programs, it will be definitely helpful to update your understanding about the culture of that program.
I see. I see. Very clear. So, those were actually in general my questions, but just I realized that I skipped one, which may be quite important for some undergrads here listening. That I wonder about the budget, like how much of a budget you should plan for in a year if you go for a PhD. Like, what will be the financial burden?
I mean, if you go with full scholarship, then you need to have like life expenses. I mean, there are very nice websites that you can basically Google. I mean, I recommend everyone to sort of Google students' like life expenditure, expectancies, etc., in different cities because the sort of like rents and those expenses they vary a lot in different cities. So in Boston, for instance, the rents are really high, but in the College Station in Texas, the rents are quite cheap. Like there are, I think, five-fold differences in those two cities. So it definitely varies. But to give you a figure, I think in Boston you need 26 grand to have a decent student life. You can survive with 22, but it will be barely survival. But in like for instance, State College in Penn State, I think you can survive with 15,000, 15 grand.
Mm,
So it definitely depends which parts of the US that you're gonna go.
mm,
But I recommend to go for like those websites to at least compare different parts of the US.
mm. But if you go with a full scholarship, regardless of where you go, I think you should be fine,
Yeah,
right?
if they're giving you a stipend, full stipends, I think that will be barely enough for you to survive. You might need a couple of grants on top of that for your flights, maybe. But other than that, I think that would be enough. I mean, don't expect to have a luxury life for sure. It's a student life. It's not different. I mean, like while I was in undergrad, I had a lot of scholarships. So I did so I was second in university exam in Turkey, so I got a lot of scholarships. So I was really rich while I was while I was in Bilkent. So I kind of get poorer when I went to Boston. Uh, so these kind of things happened, and but like in especially first 2 years you won't have much time to think about spending your money, so it won't be a problem if you can just maintain your student status for another 6 years.
Mm. I hope that curve gets steeper after as you graduate from
It
PhD.
definitely gets cheaper for sure.
Okay, so I would like to close with a more personal question. Like, right now that you're doing a postdoc in Stanford, that what are like your plans ahead, and what are you planning for in like short term and to long term?
In terms of career or like
In
research.
terms of, yeah, both, but more career and also the details, of course.
Yeah, I mean, postdocs are usually designed in a way that sort of support your own research agenda. I'm gonna work on electors markets going forwards. I have several ongoing research that I'm going to finish up in the next 2 years. I started different. So my field is sort of a field in between. Many engineering programs, there are many people in engineering programs, faculty members, they worked on similar issues, but with a different perspective. So I'm right now trying to sort of explore that different perspectives on the similar question as well, to get a more general grasp on the issue. But after this program is for 2 years, and after 2 years, I'm gonna go back in the job market and look for academic job in the U.S. Or maybe in Turkey. That's so the life is the thing that is constantly changing. So you never know what will happen next. So I wasn't really planning to be in Istanbul around this time this year, but you never know.
Yeah, maybe our next interview with you gonna be you as a professor at Bilkent. You never know. Great, great. So those were my questions, and I've been really pleased, so happy to have you here. And if you have any final thoughts, recommendations, that we will be happy to hear them as well, of course. And then we can just, have some questions for like 5 to 10 minutes, then we can close if you want.
Sure. I mean, just like last points, maybe my advice would be, don't hesitate to ask, don't hesitate to challenge yourself, don't hesitate to discover yourself. I mean, this is a big decision. This is a big life-changing decision. And if you somehow not get into good programs, don't take it personally. This is a very competitive field. It's like, as I said, at least like 1,000 people apply to MIT from all around the world. Don't get discouraged if you not get in, and don't let that to discourage your passion in academics, or like in economics. You can go on to other programs, or you can do other things. So try to learn yourself better before deciding to kind of devote your life in one. I mean, this is, I think, general for everything, not just for academia, but especially in academia, many people take these things personally. Taking these decisions personally is nothing but harm to a person's not just confidence, but overall. I think it's not really, it won't be wise to take it anything personally in academia, because there are lots of things that involves a lot of luck, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And it's not the end of the world, right? There is like always next year or an alternative approach to pursue the same career.
Yeah, I mean, I got rejected by MIT 2 times. While I was an undergrad, I applied for as a transfer student 2 times. I got rejected. So you don't know.
Did you put it in your application for PhD?
No, I didn't mention.
So you can apply up to 3 times then.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah.
Great. I get a question here from Mehmet asking, how did you get into a PhD program without having a master's degree?
I mean, so it's not really common, for sure. It's because there is a gap between undergrad economics and graduate degree economics. In PhD programs, there are, like, I think many faculty members in Bilkent, they also mention about this. Like, there is a gap, and the way that people are kind of filling that gap is by getting a master's degree. That's a good first step. But as I said, while we were talking about like what did I do in Bilkent, I got a lot of those courses while I was an undergrad. So that kind of, I think, signaled that I almost did my master's degree. But I definitely recommend to everyone, including me, to get a master's degree before going into PhD. Not that I mean, it's not a waste of time if you really want to do academics. Like, it's just 2 years of your life but if you want to stay in academia, that's like a 40 years or like 50 years job. So having an extra 2 years is not going to hurt. And having an extra 2 years is probably going to also help you to see whether you really want it or not. Only reason, I mean, I was also planning to get a master's degree. The only reason why I didn't, because I got into MIT when I was applying when I was in undergrad. So I was actually planning to do a master's degree.
Yeah. So can we say that if you don't have too many, you haven't taken too many master's courses when you're in the undergrad, and you don't really feel so confident about your application, that it might be a good to first apply for a master's somewhere and then apply for PhD after.
Yeah, definitely. I think doing master's degree in Turkey is definitely a very good option.
I see.
Don't really, yeah, going for a master's degree in US is very expensive, and I don't think it creates a huge push. Doing a master's degree in Turkey, I think it's better than doing a master's degree in, US.
Right.
Also, like in Europe, that like there are some programs that has a master's program for a year. Knowing a person, knowing a faculty member to get a letter in a year or so, it's hard to do. So I don't really recommend for going to 1 year of master's program. I mean, there are people who went for it and then got into Ignite programs, so that it's not impossible. But personally, I do not recommend it.
I see. So Bilkent masters you will recommend.
Yeah, and Bilkent, Koç, Sabancı, whichever it is, I think all of them are great programs.
I see. Before I see Atabak is a question, but before that, we also have another one from Edna. Is asking, is having bad grades in the first year, let's say 2.5 GPA, a problem for a second year student who wants to go for an academic career?
So I had a friend in my cohorts who got his undergrad degree from Boğaziçi. He graduated with like I think 2.9 GPA, something like that. Then he went to Koç for his master's degree. Now he's an assistant professor at MIT Sloan. So another example, there is a faculty member in Boston College whose GPA was like 2.9 from electrical engineering in Bilkent. So it's not impossible. It definitely hurts, but if you get your master's degree, it doesn't matter whatever you get in your undergrad. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so having a high GPA is a plus, but having a low one is not a deal breaker.
Yeah, having a high PhD it also does not. It's not a must. It's not something that will get you in. I mean, there are many programs around the world that have number of 4.0 GPA people, and they're not getting into MIT.
I see. Very clear. And Atabak is a question about applying PhD while in master's. So since you won't be graduated before you apply the PhD, is asking how the faculty will approach those students. Here you mean, I think, the faculty of PhD program that will admit you, right, Atabak?
While you are first year? Because while you apply for, like, of course you apply before you finish your thesis in your second year. So that is a normal procedure. I don't think faculty members would take that negatively. So, but if you're applying while you're first year, I think like for that you need to really talk to your professors and get their opinion, because like having a better recommendation letter is much more powerful than having a nice GPA.
Yeah. And Khan's question is about the scholarship. So I actually asking, was that as easy as you get the scholarships in Turkey having them in US. And how sustainable is it to, you know, to live there and do your PhD without financial support from your family?
What do you mean? What do you mean by sustainable? I
So
didn't.
financially, how sustainable is it to do the PhD in US without a scholarship or a support from the family?
In economics, it's, I would say, impossible.
Hmm.
Like, if it's impossible if you don't get a scholarship and if you don't get money from your parents.
And
You can't really, like, it's not a part-time job. That's what I'm trying to say. So while
yeah,
you're doing a PhD, you can't really do a part-time job.
I see.
That could help you to. I mean, I think you can do it, but I definitely don't recommend it.
I see. And what are the chances that you get the scholarship?
From different programs.
Yeah, from US, let's say,
That
or additional.
that is definitely something that is like highly random. It's like it depends on number of scholarships that a program gives to people, and it like there are a number of different things that going on into that decision. So I can't say for sure what is going into that decision.
I see. But like just my personal experience, that most people that I know go with a full scholarship from the school for the PhD in US.
So
Maybe
yeah,
it's
those are, I think those are not scholarship in the sense that like in many programs, once you get into program, they start you to do a TA-ship, teaching assistantship, immediately. So you're kind of working for your stipend. That is not a scholarship. So many programs are
I see.
accepting people by just giving them a TA-ship or RA-ship right away. So many programs they do that, so you don't really need money because that TA-ship and RA-ship gives you a stipend. But in some other programs, they do not allow you to do RA-ship or TA-ship in your first year, or like at MIT, it was for the first 2 years. So for that time period, you need to get either scholarship or funding from somewhere or your money from your parents. But it definitely depends on like the programs that you're applying for.
I see. So it's important to make your detailed research about the opportunities provided by the school. I see. Very clear. And I will take the last question, then I won't take much time of yours afterwards. Is Iram is asking, what about first doing masters in Europe, not in UK, and then doing a PhD in US? Here, what about means, I suppose that how easy or how feasible to get admitted by a PhD program in US after getting a master's in Europe, I suppose.
I mean, that works for sure. There are people who did that, but I personally don't recommend it for a couple of reasons. But this is, as I said, it's personal. It's so you need to get in touch with a professor that you're gonna get your recommendation letter, and getting in touch with a person you who who's not Turkish could be a little bit challenging, especially like in Spain or like in Italy. It could be hard. So that is a gamble, in short. So that is an important gamble. If you think that you can create that relationship with your professor right away, by all means go for it. I mean, in many like I think like from Bocconi, from Barcelona, and like from different programs in UK, many people are getting into the best programs. They're like number of people who get into it, nice PhD programs in from Bocconi is probably higher than Bilkent, Koç, and Sabancı. But I mean, there is a trade-off. You need to be really good in personal relationships, and that could be challenging for many. I mean, I had friends who tried to do that. It didn't really work. I know examples that worked very well, but I think Turkey and programs in Turkey, they have a good reputation in those top programs, that if you do well in those programs and your advisor thinks that you do well, I think you have a good chance, as much as you can get from Bocconi or like Barcelona.
I see. So keeping it in mind too that it's very important to obtain a personal fit and interaction with a professor before deciding to apply for masters is important. I see. So those were our questions. And Ömer, thank you so much. Çok teşekkür ederiz katıldığın için abi. Ağzına aklına sağlık. Çok yardımcı oldu. Bundan sonrasında da hani uygun görürsen zaten portala yükleriz. Bir tane private YouTube kanalı yapıp oraya da ekon öğrencilerini açmayı planlıyoruz. Ondan sonrasında hani umarım arkadaşlar da yararlanır. Sana da bundan sonra ulaşabilirler mi? Eğer isterlerse, yani akıllarında spesifik sorular olursa herhangi bir şekilde.
Tabii bana mail atabilirler. ömerkara@stanford.edu'dan ulaşabilirler bana. Ben de teşekkür ederim beni misafir ettiğiniz için. Yani söylediklerim bir şekilde yardımcı olabildiyse ne mutlu bana.
Oğlum bizim için çok büyük onur. Çok sağ ol tekrardan.
Doğa, I have one question for Ömer, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your PhD. That's a great thing. My question is, I'm looking at your CV now, and it says that you were TA to Professor Koray and Mr. Hasker in, I think, your third year for Econ 439 game theory and 441 graph theory to economists. So if I'm not wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, those are like to be TA of those classes, especially in your third year. Maybe you did it in second semester of third year, but if it's in the first semester especially, I think that's a great thing to do also, like that, being TA that early for those hard classes. So my question is, like, how did you achieve that? Like, have you taken, you have mentioned math classes like linear algebra and differential equations. Have you taken those in your second year after math for econ or during summer school? And the classes you have mentioned that you have taken from Comedy, have you left those in your last year? Like, what was the order of those classes you have taken, and how did you achieve to be TA of the classes I have just mentioned? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the reason why I TA'd for those classes, I think it was because there weren't many TAs at that point. So I took Semioja's course while I was the second year. I did okay in the course. Also for game theory, I think I did okay too. So Kevin asked me to be a TA for the course because I think there weren't many TAs at that point. So for Semioja is a similar. There were many people. Like Semioja's course was about matching theory and like networks. So that is something that not many people are familiar with. So that was the reason why I was TA for the course. I'm not sure whether that's terribly important for the application, but yeah, that was a nice experience. But for I think I started with in math. I started with taking mathematical analysis course in summer with differential equations, and then I got linear algebra. Like that is while I was that was the summer of my first year, I believe. But I was an irregular student, so I had an extra semester at the beginning. I don't particularly remember the order, but I think I was almost done with most of the stuff in my third year in terms of economics curriculum. I mean, but I personally don't recommend to go that fast. I mean, you don't need to hurry that much. I kind of overkill it, and it's not really. I mean, now it's easy for me to say it's an overkill. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's necessary. But now I'm looking back and see that I really didn't have to do that. That could have been. So I could have overburned while doing that, and then drop everything out. It didn't happen that way. I was lucky, but yeah, you will have enough time. Don't worry about don't worry about taking a lot of master's classes for sure. Just sit in one of those and try to get a grasp of it. It's just to get the kind of understanding of what kind of differences there is between graduate level economics and undergrad level economics. And don't really kill yourself if you don't really kill your confidence if you don't get a grasp of it at the beginning, especially for master's classes or like in math. If you don't understand mathematical analysis, that's okay. If you don't at this moment, I'm not really doing anything closely, like remotely related with real analysis or like differential equations. I'm not doing anything. So it's not really necessary, but it's a good signal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much Ömer tekrardan. Fazlasıyla vaktini aldık ama çok yararlı oldu eminim. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Haberleşiriz tekrardan.